Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. EQA Nostalgia here, and today I want to talk to you guys about the future of MMOs. But before I start talking about the future of MMOs, I want to go back into the past a little bit and kind of see where they came from and just kind of the way they've started to stagnate over time. Now, if you really want to go back into how MMOs truly got started, I guess you would kind of start with the whole Tolkien thing and the whole Lord of the Rings series. That seemed to be where a lot of the high fantasy stuff comes from. And then from there, sometime around the late 60s and early 70s, we started seeing Dungeons and Dragons. People started playing stuff like pencil and paper RPGs with each other. And from there, it grew even further into the internet age with MUDs, multi-user dungeons, where people would just use text. And I've actually engaged in that activity probably in the late 90s. I'd say I got into a chat room and I got to see what that was all about. It didn't interest me very much. I felt kind of silly about it after a while, so I only hung around for probably about a week, maybe 2 weeks. But it was something that people did, you know. I was used to graphics, so I probably just did something like went back to playing Resident Evil or Tomb Raider after a while. But that's kind of how that started on the internet. And then games like Ultima Online came around, and these were like 2D style games. And a lot of people don't realize that RuneScape came out a long time ago as well. I think that came out before EverQuest. So you had a few of these 2D MMOs, but they were usually heavy on PvP. They didn't really focus too much on PvE stuff. And, you know, then EverQuest came around in 1999, and it became a huge phenomenon. It was the first, well, one of the first 3D MMORPGs. Some people will argue that the other games came first. Personally, I see it as the first 3D MMORPG. It was just absolutely massive, and when I say massive, I mean back then massive, not like today, because much like the early console online gaming era of PS2 and the original Xbox and Dreamcast, it wasn't that big at the time. If you had like 4,000 people online, that was considered a huge amount of gamers. Now, like, nowadays you have like hundreds of thousands of players on Steam and playing on consoles with Call of Duty and stuff like that. But back in the day, EverQuest was where it was at. I mean, you had other games like Asheron's Call, Shadowbane, I believe, was another one, and Dark Age of Camelot. I remember coworkers of mine were talking about how much they liked that game, and this one kid kept coming into work, and I remember he would come in with like printed up sheets of guides that he would study on his lunch break, and he was just talking about how it was like the most amazing thing ever. You know, there's all these people online. It's a 3D world that you can explore, and it's just amazing. But back then, communities were much smaller, and I think it seems to me that people were much nicer and closer. I didn't get on board with those games. I didn't start playing MMORPGs until EverQuest Online Adventures, which is what you're seeing on your screen right now. Well, a shadow of its former self. This is an emulator without any mobs or anything like that. Most of you already know this. But that's how I got into the genre. You know, it started on PlayStation 2, and I remember inviting my coworker over and showing him the game, and he just kind of scoffed at me. And that was actually my first taste of PC elitism. And he came over, he's like, "Oh, this is just garbage. It's on a PlayStation 2. What the fuck is that?" You know, I'm playing, and you know the graphics are way better in this game, and it's just like he just kept going on and on about how what he was playing was so much more superior. But he was impressed with what they were able to pull off on PlayStation 2, because they did, with EverQuest Online Adventures, they did pull some pretty good tricks out of their hat. So that was pretty much the first console MMO. I consider it to be the first, unless you look at Phantasy Star Online, which started on Dreamcast. I consider that to be an RPG, an online RPG, but the whole lobby system to me doesn't really feel like an MMO. Like, people would get together in a lobby, and then they would go out into an instance. And then once they finished that level, They would kill a bunch of monsters, kill a boss, and then come back into the lobby. That doesn't really feel like an MMO to me. Some people would argue that point and say, yes, it was. For me, an MMORPG, I think it has to be an open world where everybody is in that world. There's no lobby-based bullshit. I mean, because if you want to say that's an MMO, you can say the same thing about Monster Hunter. But anyway, I'm getting off track. These were the early MMOs, the 3D MMOs. This is where things started to kind of pick up, but still not that many people played. And then all of a sudden, online gaming just kind of blew up. I'd say probably around the time late PS2, early PS3, and around the time World of Warcraft came out. So when World of Warcraft came out, it was kind of like the perfect timing. People were looking for something new. More people were getting on board with online gaming to begin with, and it became more of a mainstream thing. So World of Warcraft and the amount of people that started to hop online and play games, it created like a perfect storm. Before, most MMORPGs took up a lot of time, and getting anything done, you know, if you wanted to feel like you had any kind of sense of progression, it took a long time to do it. World of Warcraft had more of an instant gratification system in place where you could just log on for an hour or two, complete a bunch of quests, and get some pretty cool gear. So you felt like you were actually progressing, you know, you felt like you were getting somewhere. Whereas back with EverQuest and stuff like that, it could take days, even weeks, to get a weapon or something that, you know, was really coveted or made your character feel like a total badass. In World of Warcraft, these things came much quicker. So casuals started to really cling on to World of Warcraft. And by today's standards, World of Warcraft, back during the vanilla period when World of Warcraft was new, the older vanilla version of WoW is considered hardcore compared to what WoW is today. And the same can be said about EverQuest and EverQuest 2. Those games have changed. The business model around those games have changed. Literally everything that was classic, well, not everything, but mostly everything that was classic, started to morph into a more of a casual game because they saw the success of World of Warcraft and they wanted some of it. Everybody wanted a piece of it because, let's be honest, World of Warcraft has made an unfathomable amount of money. So naturally everybody wanted a piece of that. And what started to happen is games stopped trying to do something new and they said, okay, this is what works. World of Warcraft is doing this. It works. We know it works. So we want to make a game that is fundamentally the same as World of Warcraft but has a different skin. And you can see a lot of games that have done that, like Star Wars The Old Republic has done that. It's basically WoW. It just has a Star Wars skin. Same thing with games like Lord of the Rings Online. You know, they had the Lord of the Rings skin, but still it was basically World of Warcraft. And you know, most of these games started off as a subscription base, and that's something I didn't touch on. A lot of games did that back in the day. Basically everything, every MMORPG back in the day had a sub fee. And then slowly the free-to-play thing started to emerge once people saw that they're not pulling in the numbers they want to because most people are sticking with World of Warcraft. And that's the thing about MMOs is once you get invested into it, even though you start to get bored with it, you don't want to leave because you're already so invested, you might as well stick around. And when new content comes out, you're going to stick with it. So it has a tendency to keep people there like a fucking magnet. It just locks you in. And you don't really ever experience anything else. Now, there are some people that would be like, well, this is getting old, I want to try something else. So they'll go and they'll try something like, you know, WildStar, for example. It's a game that, from what I heard, isn't really doing that great because it was basically a sci-fi version of World of Warcraft. You know, people get on there, and at first it's really interesting because, you know, it's different. It's using the same fundamental principles, but it's different. It's something kind of different. But after a while, people start to feel like, well, I might as well just be going back to World of Warcraft now because this is pretty much the same thing. I've seen all the new you know, bullshit that they've had to offer. I've gotten through a large chunk of everything. You know, I did the story or whatever, so I'm gonna go back to World of Warcraft, and then again the magnet effect happens where they get pulled back in. Now I found myself asking, how come that didn't really happen with EverQuest? If it happened with World of Warcraft and people would get pulled back in, how come EverQuest didn't pull people off of World of Warcraft? And the only reason I can give for that is that it's just so many people not only like the more casual gameplay of World of Warcraft, but World of Warcraft came out in a time where more people were starting to hop online, and most of those people never even played EverQuest. We had a very small subscription base for what was considered successful for EverQuest. So, once again, like I said, World of Warcraft had absolute perfect timing and the perfect type of gameplay to pull in those casuals, and that's why they keep going back. But a lot of us are really sick and tired of it. A lot of people are just really fed up with World of Warcraft being on top. I mean, I think it's reasonable to say most of us can see why they've been on top. I mean, you'd have to be crazy to say they haven't consistently offered a high quality experience with their expansions and stuff like that. But it's just so played out at this point. It's just something that I don't find fun. Now, when I first started playing MMOs, when I got into EverQuest Online Adventures, what really pulled me in was the exploration, the sense of danger, and to be honest, everything was new. I hadn't seen MMOs before. So every MMO since then has kind of been like a step down, where it's like, oh, this is cool, but I've already experienced it. Something new has to come along that people haven't really seen before to pull them in. Games like Guild Wars 2 have tried to pull people away from the whole cooldowns and staring at cooldowns. They wanted more of an action-based game. Elder Scrolls Online wanted to offer more of an action-based style of combat, a more reactionary style of combat, where you would actually have to get out of the way of attacks, and skill-based shots where you had to like aim and stuff. But I think they still have like a soft lock-on thing. But there are games that are trying to do that, but they're not really getting off of the ground. Something really has to come out that just completely changes things up. And I think the first glimpse that we really got of that is hopefully EverQuest Next. That's why when I saw EverQuest Next for the first time, I got really excited, and that's pretty much when I started to pick up my channel. If you look back in my videos, if you've got the time to take a look and go back to see when my channel went from kind of not really doing much to boom, all of a sudden I'm making videos left and right and my views are skyrocketing, it's when EverQuest Next came out. Well, when the news of EverQuest Next started to come around, because I got extremely excited. It shook the foundation of MMOs and said, hey, we're going to do something different here. We're going to try something new. And I know a lot of people that are subscribed to me are not interested in EverQuest Next at all. They think that everything should stay classic, and if it's not broke, don't fix it. I can understand that, but I really don't feel that way. I mean, don't get me wrong. If EverQuest Online Adventures does come back and they get the emulator working perfectly fine, I'm going to play it. I'm going to play it, and I'm going to love it. I'm going to make tons of videos about it. I'm going to be all over it. But there's a large part of me that's ready to move on and try something different, because I've already explored EQOA. That world has already been explored. I want something new. And that might piss some of you guys off, or you might feel betrayed that I'm saying that. And I'm sorry if you feel that way, but I think it's nice to get into some new territory. And one of the things that actually pulled me in about EverQuest Next is that the world changes. Enemies that might be in the forest one day, they might not be there anymore because they're seeing that nobody really travels here. It's not worth it for us to stick around because we're not getting any gold, like say bandits, for example. Nobody comes through this road anymore. There's no point in being here. Let's relocate to a road where people go. Or maybe you'll start killing goblins, and those goblins will get pissed off, and they'll reinforce their ranks, and then before you know it, there's a fort there, and that wasn't there a week ago. That is extremely interesting to me. I like static camps from EverQuest Online Adventures. I love sitting down and just chatting with people and playing EverQuest Online Adventures. I miss that, and games don't do that anymore. You don't really see that anymore, and EverQuest Online Adventures was very unique in that way because it did so many things that you don't really see at all anymore. It was such a strange game. If you think about it, EQOA, I know I'm getting off subject here from EverQuest Next, but it was extremely unique. The loot table was very unique. There were so many different items. A lot of them shared the same graphic, yes, but there were so many of them, and you didn't just complete a quest and then you got the item. You know, there's things that dropped in that game that only a handful of people ever got to actually equip on their character or to see at all. That kind of shit doesn't happen anymore. So that's why I'm still very much interested in EQOA. Not just for the nostalgia, because it was such a very unique game. But with EverQuest Next, I think it's mostly for me about the world and the way that the world changes. That's exciting to me. You know, if I play tonight, like let's say EverQuest Next is out right now. I play tonight and I run through, and you know, Kinos is just being built by the players because this is what they're promising us. Keep in mind, this is Sony or Daybreak Games now. They've said things, and it hasn't really, you know, you can't always trust what they say. What I'm trying to get down to here. But if they deliver what they've promised in their videos and their speeches, being able to build cities and actually get involved in it and then defend those cities, and if you don't defend those cities, they become overrun by enemies or destroyed. That is incredibly interesting to me. That will keep me engaged. If I come home from work and I don't log in and I go to bed because I'm just so tired because my job's just fucking sucking the life out of me, I'm going to get up in the morning and be like, oh my god, what did I miss? You know? What did I miss while I was sleeping? What did I miss while I was at work? And I log in and I see, wow, you know, a part of the town that we were working on has either been destroyed or it's already done and I wasn't there for it. That's something that's really interesting to me. And EverQuest Next is promising to do this. It's promising to change where NPCs are standing, camps, and all that shit. I mean, imagine if when you were playing EverQuest Online Adventures, and I'm sorry if you can't relate to this if you're from outside my channel, but any given MMO that you play, World of Warcraft or whatever you're into, imagine if things changed all the time. You know, enemies weren't there. Now that might not be appealing to some people. Some people like consistency. I mean, it would suck in an old school setting if the quest you're used to doing is no longer there. You have to find it and it's somewhere else. But, you know, let's not cross paths here. That wouldn't work with classic EverQuest, but it would be really amazing to get into a world that constantly changed and evolved, right? Or became destroyed in some way. I'm just intrigued by that, and I'm hoping that that's the future of MMOs and they do take that route. I want to be able to run through the same forest over and over again and say, wow, this is still interesting to me. I'm not tired of this, you know. I didn't kill fire bats for the past, you know, 2 years because they're not there anymore. They're like fucking extinct and something else is here. That's interesting to me. And another game that's interesting to me I want to talk about briefly is Crowfall. And that's a game that has about roughly 30 hours left in its Kickstarter. And it crushed its Kickstarter goals. It's well over its goals. It's into like 1.5 million or something right now. And yeah, it looks very interesting because the world changes. And I'm just going to get into, if you don't know what that's about, I'm just going to discuss that briefly. In a very similar way to EverQuest Next, there are voxels that can be destroyed. You can destroy a castle, you can destroy a wall, you can dig tunnels and go underneath a wall and invade the enemy's keep or castle or what have you. That's incredibly interesting to me. And the world constantly changes. When a campaign first starts, and it's heavily PvP based, I forgot to mention, which is something I never really got into until recently. PvP is interesting to me just because it's so different from what I'm used to with PvE. But at any rate, you can go around the world and level up killing shit, and I'm not sure if there are quests or not. There probably is. But you would do PvE content to level up your character, and then you would engage in a campaign against other nations, and it becomes kind of like a strategy game where you're trying to take them out and win. And once you win, the world gets destroyed completely, which, by the way, everything's destroyable anyway, so if you come to one area one day, it could look really awesome and serene, and then it's just utterly decimated the next day. But once you win the game, it starts over. Your hero lasts forever. Your character doesn't get deleted, but the world does, and you get to go into like this limbo place that is like the base of operations for the game, where your keep is and all this stuff. The details are kind of bouncing around in my head because I haven't really invested a lot of time looking into it. I just got really excited after seeing it, and I wanted to talk about it. So the next time you enter into a server and you start playing, or whatever kind of area, I don't know if I'd call it a different server, maybe a different instance, the world is completely different. The mountains that you knew aren't there anymore. Instead, it's a desert, or, you know, over here is where the forest is. It wasn't there before. Lakes are in different spots. Rivers are in different spots. Villages and everything are completely rearranged. That is incredibly interesting to me because it's going to keep me engaged in the game, right? I mean, I'm not going to get sick and tired of the same old terrain. And to some people, that's a turnoff, and I've read that in comments, and I've actually seen that on my own Facebook page from people that have posted, and I am not interested in that. And I can understand why people might not be interested in that, because when I think about EQOA, I think about stuff like Crowfall Glade and Narak, and all those different towns that I remember. And if the game was constantly changing, you wouldn't really have those memories. Like with EverQuest Online Adventures, there was no map. You learned where landmarks were. You know, you come to a rock and then you go, okay, now I got to turn left, follow the river north, and then when you get to the end of a river or a tree or something, you would turn and go east. So we learned how to gauge the land from different landmarks. You could never do that in a game that is constantly changing. But nevertheless, it's different and it's interesting. Like I said, I don't plan on stopping what I like to do already, which is playing games like EQA. Hopefully EQA does develop and get reborn, because I will definitely be all over that. But part of me wants something new. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having variety. And that's what I'm looking for. And I know a lot of other MMO gamers are just so sick and tired of the status quo. We want something new. And to me, it looks like EverQuest Next and Crowfall are the two games that are trying to do that. Now, there might be other games that I haven't looked into that are being made right now. If I'm unaware of them, please leave a comment in the comment section and let me know about them, because I love looking into stuff like that. But it has to be something unique. It can't just be the same old, you know. But at any rate, I'm very interested in the future of MMORPGs. I think it's time that we move forward, and it's time that we get some new life into this genre. And one last thing I wanted to talk about, and it's kind of way out there, that's why I saved it for last, because it doesn't really have much to do with my main point here, is hybrid style MMORPGs. And this one's you guys are gonna be scratching your head thinking, what? Now, there are already games like H1Z1 and DayZ, survival style MMOs. I'm not really interested in that. I'm more interested in H1Z1 than DayZ. I don't really like the whole community that springs up around a PvP only community. It tends to get a little nasty, you know. And personally, I think it would just suck if you build up your character and then you get killed and you have to start all over again. I haven't played it, so I really don't have any room to say anything. But I would like to see more survival style MMORPGs or survival horror style MMORPGs that are PvE oriented. And I remember getting on the Silent Hill forums and mentioning this to people. Imagine if Silent Hill 2 or the world of Silent Hill was an MMO. And people basically just shut that down right away. They're like, oh, it wouldn't be scary if there were other people. Well, maybe it wouldn't be as scary. Okay, that's fine. But imagine a whole open city, an open world, even Resident Evil style, where there's all of these terrible creatures everywhere. And things change on a day and night schedule. You know, you'd have different creatures outside at different times. But all of the buildings, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them, you would be able to go into them like they were dungeons. You know, the buildings that you remember going into in Silent Hill 2, you'd be able to go in there, and it would play kind of like a dungeon where you could scavenge for supplies, and you could just kind of go in there as a group, like an instance. But on the outside, everything was just like a massive world with no loading. You would just load into the buildings, obviously. I think something like that would be incredibly interesting, and nobody's ever tried it. And I can't really understand why. Because it's kind of there with DayZ and H1Z1, but it's not what I'm really looking for. Maybe it's just something in my head. It's incredibly niche, but to me it seems so obvious to make something like Silent Hill 2 or Resident Evil 1 or 2 or something like third-person view where you go through and survive with other survivors. You know, you would just run across other survivors. And the servers would have to be relatively small. Like, you couldn't have like 1,000, 2,000 people running around one city, because then it would just be a complete clusterfuck. You would have to have something like 50 to 100 people on each instance, and you wouldn't each server rather, and you wouldn't be locked into that server. You would kind of be able to bounce around like RuneScape and go into different servers, maybe with even different rules. Let me know what you guys think about that, because I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think it would be great if you could, you know, scavenge. Maybe even you have to survive by drinking water or food or something. Maybe your character can die, but your stats transfer over to another character. Something like that I think would be incredibly fun. And no, it wouldn't be the same as an offline survival horror game. It wouldn't be as scary. But nevertheless, I think I would enjoy that very much, and it would be very unique. But that's just something that was rambling around in my head. Sometimes I just get random thoughts like that, and I like to share them with you guys. But I was playing Resident Evil Revelations the other day, Revelations 2, and I was thinking how much better this would be if the world was wide open and there were other players to share it with. You know, other areas to go into, you know, not just a fixed area on a linear path. I want to be able to just walk through the city streets, scavenging for ammo, scavenging for any kind of supplies, maybe batteries for a flashlight even, things like that. But yeah, that's my take on it. Just my ideas for the future of MMOs, and hopefully everything works out with Crowfall and EverQuest Next, and maybe I'll get the survival horror MMO I've been dying to play. But yeah, that is about it for this video, guys. I thank you for watching. If you are new to my channel, I ask that you please subscribe and hit the like button. Even if you're not new, you should totally hit the like button, because that lets me know that my time was not wasted. I thank you all for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.